You'll go to hell if you've lived in sin. So say your prayers, 'cause here comes Grim.
Hello lovelies, today we're taking another look at the Marvel Multiverse role-playing game, and in this case we're taking a look at the X-Men expansion for it, which I presume will be a model for the forthcoming Spider-Verse one and whatever other supplementary material that they put together. Now, American comics. When I was a wee nipper, they used to be relatively hard to get hold of over here. There were reprints that were done in the more conventional British comics format of the time, which was cheap newsprint, but in black and white. So to see American comics, I generally had to wait for my friend's dad, who was an airline pilot, to get back from the States with a stash for his son, which I could then pilfer and look through myself, which was how I saw a lot of G.I. Joe comics during the 1980s. But yeah, so I came into Marvel Comics, DC Comics late, and I was always more into the Marvel stuff. And I've tended to only read it in the experience of trade paperbacks and so on, or collected editions over the years. And I haven't been keeping up with it at all since Grant Morrison's X-Men run, I suppose. You know, you got to support your fellow countrymen. So that was the last time I took much interest. I kind of checked out of American comics as a whole when they stopped using allegory and artistry to create universally appealing stories and began propagandizing people. Even if I might agree with the propagandizing being done, I felt it was relatively artless and crude. So, you know, the X-Men in particular, I think, have been through a lot of changes. They were massive for a very long time, and started out as a sort of allegory for Cold War paranoia and the civil rights struggle, again, through the power and art of allegory. The LGBT rights struggle, again, through allegory, and all of this other stuff, to become what they are today, which is apparently endless X-prom. Which I'm just not interested in, so I am behind on a great deal, and this book kind of caught me up on a great deal and made me feel like I hadn't actually missed out on very much, though it did make it confusing in some ways. So if you're an older fan coming to the X-Men, maybe it's not quite for you, but there is enough material in here alongside the main book that I think it is a reasonably worthwhile purchase. I mean, time moves on. To me, my X-Men used to be the cry. Now it sounds like something you'd shout in the tea portion of a pride parade. So yeah, times change, contexts change. Not always necessarily for the better, sometimes just indifferent. So much preamble because there's not a huge amount for me to say about this book. Not because it's spoilers, but because so much of the book is a sort of mini encyclopedia, a shortened encyclopedia version talking about mutants, their place in the history, the different comic book phases, the different story arcs, and so there's not a lot for me to say about that. I mean, it's useful if you haven't been an obsessive follower of Marvel or X-Books in particular, but it's not as in-depth perhaps as you'd want it to be. I believe there are Marvel encyclopedias as well, and I think, is it Matt Forbeck worked on those as well as the RPG, so maybe there's some crossover there. Maybe it's worth getting those if you're more into the history, but there's not a lot of point in me going over all of it, save to say that as far as I can tell, it's all here, just in various different forms. So, if you followed the Claremont run in particular, you will find information on that. If you were particularly into Rachel Summers and Nightmares of Futures Past, you'll find information about that. I haven't in depth gone into the history, reading it, word by word, page by page, because I'm not that bothered about it when it comes to role-playing games. So I'm not sure if the X-Men's hijinks in Asgard are in here or not, but I would expect that they would be. That was actually one of my favourite little trade paperbacks to read. But yeah, you'll find all of the familiar stuff here. You will also find information on all of the main mutant teams. So you'll find info on X-Force, Exterminators, Exiles, all of that stuff. And you also cover quite a lot of the different villains, so Mojo and so on. The sort of mutant school side of things is nicely covered. So if you wanted to base yourselves around Professor X and the mansion, you could, or if you wanted to set up a different mutant school or create your entirely new different paradigm within your side universe, you could easily enough do that as well. So there is plenty there, as well as the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants and their equivalents, and the Hellfire Club. So, what good is a hero without villains? So you cover most of that. As you can see, Alpha Flight gets covered as well. Yeah, I mean, so if you're after background information, but you don't want anything too in-depth, then I think this book is an excellent resource for that. But if you want to go truly in depth on any of the stuff that's covered here, you should probably go for one of the Marvel encyclopedias, either one of the fan versions or one of the official versions you can find out there. Of course, if you want all the art and everything, you're going to have to go for the official version. Mojo, one of my favourite villains, makes his appearance. As I say, it goes through all the different universes. There's Old Man Logan's world, there's the Mojoverse, there's Nightmares of Futures Past, there's all those different things. So that is about, let's see, page count comes out to 250 pages. So about half the book is background information, different universes, different teams, history of the comics, the plot lines, and so on. New Rules takes up a lot of the second half, but you have to remember that a lot of that is the character profiles. So of the other half, I'm guessing about half again. Yeah. About half of what remains is character profiles. That doesn't feel like a rip-off in the way you might think that it would, because it lets you get into the characters and consider what rules are used for them, how that might influence what you want to do for your own characters, how those rules are interpreted, and so on. So we do get more specialized rules for creating mutants. We get new equipment, items, new powers. We get somewhat expanded vehicle rules, which is nice, but they do remain fairly simple, so they might not scratch that itch for a lot of people. I imagine at some point there will be some kind of supplement for more gadget and armor oriented heroes that may go into more depth on that sort of thing. Because I mean, there's plenty of heroes and villains in the Marvel Universe that use technology and suits, or a mix of technology and suits and other powers. Doom, Iron Man, Stilt Man, all of those various options. So yeah, it's a welcome addition, and it's really the main thing that's somewhat new. The rest is just additions to materials. So new powers, rules for various things from the Marvel books and the X-Men books in particular, like the evolutionary effects of drugs and viruses and things that have gone around, explanations on the Phoenix Force, the experiments of Mr. Sinister, all of that sort of thing. It's all here. So that's good. New traits and tags for you to use. Not a huge amount of those, but any additions are welcome. I think those are the areas that perhaps need the most expansion in the game, traits and tags. So that's something to look forward to, perhaps. The main sort of meat and potatoes for most people is going to be, what are the new powers? How are they collected together? And we do get plenty of options here. And it's fairly obvious that they're kind of filling in the gaps as they go along, creating the templates for existing characters and then having to make up powers where they're needed. There's also this new category of narrative powers here, and I'm not sure about whether I would want to necessarily allow those to fall into the hands of players, because they are things that have a very loosey-goosey story effect, hence the term narrative powers. And so they're quite far-reaching and unpredictable in a way that other powers are not necessarily. So then, of course, we get a ton of character profiles. And I'm not hugely sure about the choices here. A lot of these are not really familiar to me, so they must be from newer X-Men or more obscure titles. So from my point of view, there's a bunch of stuff I don't recognize and a bunch of heroes and characters who are missing that I would have thought should have been included, like Sunspot and so on. Of course, I haven't kept up with X-Men, so that explains why I don't recognize some of these characters. But there does seem to have been a little bit of extra effort put in to include weirder side characters and newer characters, perhaps at the expense of some of the older characters. And that's not a choice I would have made. I guess, put it that way. I would have concentrated on the more classic, recognizable characters as being the priority, and then filled up any remaining space with the new ones. But this is also a valid choice, and I guess if you're trying to reach for the current comics market, however small it might be, then it makes more sense to go for the new ones. You do also get quite a few villains in here, which is probably more useful. But like I said, the main reason I think for having so many character profiles is because people are interested in how their favourite character gets translated to the game and how they could perhaps build a similar character. And so these all provide useful options and information on how you might go about doing that. So, there weren't any particular shocking revelations, but it is a lot of material, and it's not necessarily of a huge amount of use. I guess it depends on your game. If people want to play existing heroes, then this is gold dust. If you're a player looking to make up a character who is similar to a pre-existing character, then again this is good. If you're a games master looking for a quick villain, or to have them interact with classic heroes, genuine heroes rather than just their own characters, then yeah, you've got that too. So I mean, I think a lot of people want the profiles of characters when it comes to tie-in games. So to me, this isn't a waste or an issue. I think it's necessary, and I think I've said something similar when looking at the G.I. Joe or Transformers RPGs, that people are interested in what the classic characters are statted out like, and maybe they want to take on those classic villains. I think it would possibly be more useful to have included more villains for people to fight against, but comme ci, comme ça. I can kind of see it either way. So in terms of scores, this book is a little cramped compared to the main book, in my opinion, or it just feels like the text to art ratio is much more towards the text in this one. The artwork choices, I mean, you've got an entire history of comics to look at and draw from. Some of the choices are interesting, but mostly they seem to have had, again, as with the main book, a good eye for which art to use and which art not to use, to the point where I wonder if this is particularly representative of the modern state of Marvel Comics, because a lot of the art choices in the actual comics recently have been fairly questionable, shall we say. But overall, a middling 4 for style, I think. More could have been done, but it's good, solid choices, and it's up there at the better end of commercial RPG publishing, largely by drawing upon the comics world material. In terms of substance, on a personal level, I don't give a shit about Krakoa or anything to do with it. So, and I'm not particularly interested when it comes to running a game. I'm not particularly interested in any of the different worlds and history and so on. But while it's not useful for me, I can recognize that it is useful and interesting for other people who want to run a more canonical sort of campaign. So not for me, but still has value for a lot of other people, I think. The new rules is a bit slim, but it has what you want. So team maneuvers, reputation, ideas about how to run mutant schools and the stuff that you associate with mutant schools, new equipment, basic vehicle rules, new powers, all of that kind of thing. A bit more guidance through the form of the danger room on what sort of challenges and stuff you can create for people. Pretty much everything you'd want there. And then the character dossiers, they're kind of what you would expect, really. Even so, recognizing that a lot of the book is just not for me as the kind of games master I am. Even so, despite all that, I do think they could have spent more time on more powers, traits, tags, equipment. The vehicle rules could have been a bit more expansive. That's where I would have spent more effort, I think. And the historical stuff and the alternate universe stuff, right, it's already shorter than it needs to be. I think they could have shortened it further without losing much in terms of content in order to make room for more rules, powers, and so on, or even more dossiers, because I did feel like quite a lot of characters you would have expected to have appeared in the dossiers just weren't there. So in terms of substance, I mean, it's what you expect, but it's nothing more. So in terms of substance, I would give it a 3. And I would again pause briefly to remind you that when I'm giving scores, each of these 2 scores is out of 5, and 3 is the average, or strictly speaking 2.5 is the average. So a score of 3 is perfectly serviceable, what you'd expect. It just doesn't go over and above what you would expect. So 3 is a perfectly good score, right? If a book I judge scores 3 in both categories, yeah, it's a good solid buy if you're into that system, or you want something of that type. It's not outstanding. So anything above a 3 is good. So I gave this a 4 for style, 3 for substance, 7 out of 10, 3.5 out of 5. Above average, not something you necessarily need, but I did pay for it out of my own money, which has its own things to say about the core book and the Marvel Multiverse RPG and its system as a whole. So there you go. As a model for future supplements, it's good enough. Could have been a bit better. The only advice I would have given, I think, would be to shrink down some of the lore sections and use the additional space to increase the useful bits, the powers, the skills, the traits, the tags, and the more expansive vehicle rules. Hopefully, future supplementary books will improve on what we have here, but I think it's just a matter of getting the balance right, and I recognise that what I want from these books isn't necessarily what anyone else wants. Zang.
Daikaiju Dai is a game about beating up monsters in giant mecha. The players take the part of mecha pilots and their support crew, using the fate system to allow the one to influence the other. They will fight giant monsters and walk in their shadow. They will establish rivalries and defeat villains. They will uncover conspiracies and lead the fight back against what seems to be a world itself in rebellion against humanity. Mostly, though, they'll smash giant monsters to pieces in epic, destructive fights. Available from post-mort.com, lulu.com and DriveThruRPG.